Hello, today we're going to cover some of the basics of fish keeping. We're going to start by going over the nitrate cycle, whether or not you need a heater, the difference between warm weather and cold weather fish. Then we're going to talk about compatibility between different kinds of fish so that you don't have any kind of violence issues. Then we're going to talk about choices of substrate, what might be best for the bottom of your tank. Then we're going to talk about actually the process of buying the fish. Then when you have the fish, getting them from the store, making sure they're netted appropriately, acclimating them to your tank when you get there. And then finally, the maintenance you need to do on your tank routinely. Lots of people just start with a fish bowl and they just leave their fair fish in there. They live a year and they think they did a good job. But most fish can live much longer. So the tips in this video are going to help you ensure that your fish have the adequate care they need to live a full lifespan. The first decision you have to make is what size aquarium are you going to get? It all really depends on what fish you want, but you need to cycle your aquarium before you buy any fish. So here are some tips to help you get there. First of all, you might have heard the old inch per gallon rule, that if you have 1 inch of fish, it needs 1 gallon of water to live in. And that's just not true. Fish need to have enough space to behave normally when they reach their full size. Some people will buy a smaller tank and upgrade as they go, but it's best to just already have a tank on hand that fish can live its entire lifespan in. You may have heard that fish will keep growing until they reach the size of the tank and then that they're healthy from there on. And that's also not true. What happens is their organs keep growing and they end up dying prematurely. So it's very important that you get the correct size aquarium from the beginning. A larger aquarium is going to have more water volume to dilute nitrates and other chemicals, and it gives you a lot more options for fish because it's bigger. The bad side of a large aquarium is it might make more noise or it might require more maintenance depending on the filtration system you choose. It also takes up more space. A smaller aquarium, and some of this will seem redundant, but it's easier to place in your house or your apartment. Also, your water changes are going to be much faster because there's a lower total volume of water. On the downside, though, you have many less options for fish, and because there's less water volume, those bad chemicals that build up over time are going to build up a lot easier, and you're going to have to do potentially more water changes. A good beginner size for most people is a 20-gallon tank. It allows many small fish, and it's only about 2.5 feet long. The most important thing to understand when keeping fish is the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle happens anytime you have an animal producing waste. In a fish tank, this means ammonia is excreted from the fish after they eat the fish food. Ideally, you have a healthy buildup of beneficial bacteria that then convert this ammonia into nitrite. After that, a different kind of bacteria convert this nitrite into nitrate. Nitrate is much less harmful to your fish than ammonia and builds up in the water over time. If you have a lot of plants, they can help reduce these nitrates. But ultimately, the best way to reduce nitrates in the aquarium is to do water changes. Most people recommend a 50% water change every week. Depending on how many fish you have in the tank, you might do more or less. But it is essential you do this. In addition to this, you also have to have filtration in the aquarium. There are 3 different kinds. For a beginning fish keeper, you really need to worry most about 2. The first kind is mechanical, and this is just bringing out large chunks from the water. Sponge filters often do this, or you might see in a filter, you might see some kind of screen that people use that you can rinse out, get the chunks out that way. Biological filtration is exactly what these bacteria are doing. This nitrogen cycle helps those lets those bacteria process those dangerous chemicals to your fish. So many people use ceramic media or other kinds of objects that beneficial bacteria are encouraged to grow on so this nitrogen cycle can happen. And this is essential that you've started this nitrogen cycle before you even get fish. The way you start that nitrogen cycle without fish is either buying a product at a pet store that helps you do a fishless cycle, or you can introduce ammonia if you have it. And over time, those bacteria will develop in the water. You can measure using a standard test kit to find out when nitrates begin being present and you no longer have ammonia in the tank. The next thing to determine is if you're going to need a heater for your fish tank. Most fish that you're going to buy that are tropical fish are going to need to be kept between 76 and 84 degrees, which with many being in between the 78 to 82 range. Any fish in that range needs to be kept at that range. So if your house is that warm, you're not going to need a heater. If your house is much colder than that, most people keep their room temperature around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe a little warmer, a little colder, then you're going to need a heater to bring your fish up to that. In the next video, we're going to talk about what fish are cold water fish, what fish are warm water fish, which fish can tolerate a much larger range of temperatures, and which fish really don't do well in those situations. But the basic rule is, unless you're buying goldfish, you're going to need a heater. When choosing cold water or warm water pets, your decision really is all around if you have a heater or not. The most common fish people choose if they're not going to have a heater is the goldfish. There are lots of varieties. They're very popular. It is still important you have a filter, you do water changes, everything else. The only difference is they don't need a heater. They can thrive at room temperature. They tolerate a huge range of those temperatures. Other fish you could consider if you don't want to have a heater. The white cloud minnow is very popular. Most people like the look of it. They're fairly small, easy to keep. Additionally, many barbs can be kept at temperatures in the 60s quite comfortably. They're also a small fish, so it's a good choice for first-time fish keepers. Hill stream loaches, while not always found easily in pet stores, are another fish that thrives in the cold water, and they look quite a bit different than your standard fish. And finally, if you don't want to have a fish, if you want to branch out a little bit, axolotls are very popular. The one pictured here is albino, but you can also get them in a more natural brownish color, similar to the hill stream loach. They will need frequent water changes. They still need a filter. They just don't need a heater. In fact, you might even need a chiller to cool the water if you do want to keep an axolotl. Common warm water fish include the neon tetra. These only get a little over an inch long. There's also a similar fish called the cardinal tetra that many people like to keep. They school together, so they can create a very nice appearance when they all move as one across from one side of your tank to the other. Another schooling fish that's quite common is the tiger barb, named for their stripes. And they need to also be kept with a heater, normally in that like 76 to 82 range. Betas are very common. People unfortunately keep them in a vase or a bowl with no filter, no heater, way too often. Your beta should live way longer than a few months or a year, but most people don't take care of their fish appropriately. Betas can tolerate even warmer temperatures than many other fish, so it would be perfectly acceptable to keep your beta around 80 degrees. Angelfish are pretty common. These do get a little larger, but not too large for many of the beginner-sized tanks. They also need to be kept in the high 70s. And then finally, Plecostomus, or plecos as they're often called, are very common. There's all kinds of varieties. They need to be kept in warm water most of the time. Sometimes you'll see them paired with goldfish, but it's really better for the fish to be kept in warm water. There are lots of other fish, thousands that you could keep. A good way to think about it is, if you're going to get a fish you don't know about, just research the temperature they need. If they're native to an area that has wild temperature swings, they're going to be able to tolerate more variation in temperature. So if you're from North America and you want to keep fish from North America, they're already going to do okay in that climate. If you're from North America and you want to keep fish from Southeast Asia, they're going to need warmer water, and you're going to have a heater. If you're going to mix fish, you need to make sure they're compatible. Before you buy a fish at the store, before you purchase it online, before a friend gives it to you and you introduce it to your tank, you need to make sure it's going to get along with your other fish. Some fish will eat anything they can fit their mouth around. Other fish are going to nip fins no matter what. And some fish are totally peaceful and actually act as what we call dithers and can reduce aggression across the tank. So the most important thing you can do is research the fish ahead of time, find out if they are compatible. Some are hard water fish, some are soft water fish, some are warm water fish, some are cold water fish. All these things need to play a part. The most important thing you can do is research it ahead of time. Don't buy a fish because you like the way it looks, only to go home and have a fish worth 3 or even 4 figures eaten by another fish because you didn't research ahead of time. When choosing what you're going to use for substrate for an aquarium, it's important to consider what the fish needs in its environment. Many people like to choose colorful aquarium gravel like you see here, but there are lots of other options. For a more natural look, sand is an excellent choice. Most fish can interact with sand safely. It's not going to hurt them. Additionally, some people keep their tank bare bottom. The pro of this is it's going to allow you to clean the tank much easier. There's no crevices for extra food or poop or other items to get lodged in where you can't clean it. The downside to bare bottom is it's not very natural. Many fish won't act natural. Finally, dirt is an excellent choice, but can be very, very difficult to keep in place. Most people cap it with a layer of gravel on top of the dirt. That way they get all of the natural nutrients. They can grow plants out of it, but they don't get the dirt leaching into the water, discoloring it, all kinds of other items. Ultimately, it's up to what best fits your fish and what you want it to look like when it's a finished product. There are a few different options for actually acquiring your fish. Most people are going to go to their local fish store, or LFS as we often abbreviate it, and they just pick out fish from the tank. The second option is buying online, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. When you go to a local fish store, it's most important that you make sure there aren't dead fish in the tanks. Normally, all the tanks of the same type, if they're all warm water, they're on the same system. So you need to make sure, even if the tank you're fish in has dead fish in it, or doesn't have dead fish in it, the one next to it does, that means your fish is in the same environment. So there should be no dead fish. All of them should look healthy. And whatever fish you want, you should take the time to watch it. This could be 5 minutes, this could be 15 minutes, but you want to make sure the behavior is as normal as possible. Some fish at a local fish store might not have as much color as they will when they get home in your perfectly sculpted, prepared aquarium, but it's most important that they appear healthy before you even take them home. When you buy online, it's most important that you're available. Often the fish are delivered and it could be a hot day, it could be a cold day. They might be shipped across the country or even across the world. So it's most important that you acquire them right away and get ready to acclimate them. For both kinds of fish, the acclimation process is the same. Throughout these segments, we've gone over the basics of setting up your first fish tank and kind of preparing for what you need to do. The most important thing you can ever do is just continually research. If you have any questions, if you're not sure, don't just rely on old wisdom or what a friend tells you. Look it up online. Secondly, never forget to continually do your maintenance. The fish are going to continue to poop in the water. You're going to continue to generate more nitrates, and you're going to have to clear those nitrates out. There could be hard mineral deposits, all kinds of things. Never forget your maintenance and enjoy your fish.